In this video I'm showing how I fixed an issue with a 2016 Ford F-150 where the rear driver's side door had trouble unlocking. Just to show what I mean here, if I hit the unlock button once, then the knob wouldn't come up all the way, so the door wouldn't unlock on the first try. However, if I hit the unlock button a few times, then the knob would come up just enough for the door to open. And I'll start off by saying I might be the only person in the world having this problem. A few years ago somebody thought the truck would look better if the rear window was bashed in, so they went ahead and took care of that for me. So I had to have that window replaced, and I'm still finding bits of glass to this day. So I'm not sure if that ordeal caused this or not, but I thought I'd put the video out anyways, in case somebody else is having the same problem. To start, I'd recommend acquiring one of these trim removal tools. I got a pack of them from an auto parts store. They're not very expensive, and they're a safer way to work with plastics than using a screwdriver or something. To remove the door panel, you have to remove this piece of plastic that goes over the handle. You should be able to pry around the edges of it with a trim tool to get it to come loose. There's also screws under this small plastic panel, so you'll have to remove this as well. In total, there are 6 screws you have to take out to remove the door panel. 2 of them are under the handle, 2 of them are under the small plastic square panel, and then the final 2 are at the very bottom of the door. If I remember correctly, they were all 7mm. I'm not really a car guy, and I'm kind of afraid of tearing something up, so I just used a screwdriver for all of these. I've seen folks in other videos use drills for this, and it seemed like it worked out fine for them, so do whatever you're comfortable with. Once all of the screws were removed, I went around the edges of the door with the trim removal tool and pried it loose. Then I lifted the door panel up over the weather stripping for the window and the knob for the lock, and I rested it in place so I could disconnect the cables. And of course there's the wonderful sound of some small metal part popping loose and hitting the concrete. The door panel had 2 cables to disconnect, one for the door latch and one for the power window button. The door latch cable is a little tricky. You just have to feel around for a tab that you press down on, and then the cable should come loose. The cable for the power window button is also held in place by a small tab that you should be able to just press down on to release. And at this point you should be able to remove the door panel. I also got lucky and found the part that fell earlier. It happened to be one of these little retainer nuts that goes behind the door handle. I noticed for a while that the knob had this white dust building up on it, and since my hobbies are not quite that interesting,
Well, somebody's chipper this morning. Oh, you guys are there all this time?
this is just from 2 plastic parts rubbing together. Just to confirm my suspicion that this was some kind of friction problem, I tested unlocking the door while the door panel was removed, and it seemed like it worked on the first try each time. So that tells me it was just meeting some kind of resistance when the door panel was on. So I took a look at the door panel, and when I looked at the hole where the knob sits, I could tell it was all kind of chewed up from the knob going up and down and rubbing up against it. I took a file and I worked on it a little bit just to kind of grind down some of the rougher edges. Then I got some multi-purpose grease and I spread some around on the part of the knob that comes in contact with the door panel. And I greased up the hole on the door panel as well. Then I put the door panel back in place, and I reattached the cable for the door latch, as well as the cable for the power window button. Getting the door panel back on is a little tricky. I don't think there's any advice I can give here. I just had to kind of fiddle with it for a minute to get it put back together the way I found it. Next it was time to put the screws back in. I'll show which screws went where in case you got them mixed up. The screws that look like this were from underneath of the little square plastic panel. These guys with the washers were from underneath the door handle. And then the 2 remaining small black screws were from the holes on the bottom. Then I just snapped both of the plastics back in place. Then I cleaned up some of the excess grease that was on the knob. It does unlock on the first try now. A few weeks have passed since I did this project and finally had time to sit down and make a video about it. And for what it's worth, I haven't seen the problem again, so at this point I'm going to call it fixed. Hopefully this is helpful if you're experiencing the same problem with your F-150. Hit like if this helped you out, and thanks for watching.